This morning, you put on clothes without thinking about it. You reached into a drawer, pulled out fabric, and covered your body. It felt automatic, normal, invisible. But the real answer to why you did that is far stranger than habit. Your ancestors were naked for millions of years. No shirts, no wraps, no idea what fabric even was. Then, at some point, something changed. And that change may be one of the most important decisions your species ever made. When did it happen? And why did it happen at all? For most of human history, there was no need for clothing. Early hominins were covered in body hair, just like other primates. That hair regulated temperature. It protected skin from the sun. It did the job clothes do for you now. So the first mystery isn't when humans started wearing clothes. It's when humans lost the hair that made clothes necessary in the first place. Around 2 million years ago, something happened to the human body. Ancestors like Homo erectus began losing their thick body hair. Scientists believe this happened as early humans started walking longer distances and hunting during the heat of the day. Sweating became the new cooling system. Fur trapped heat. Bare skin released it. A hairless body could run further, hunt longer, and survive heat that would exhaust a furred animal. But there was a problem. Losing hair solved the heat issue. It created a cold issue. Without fur, human skin had no protection once the sun went down, or once early humans migrated toward colder regions of the world. So the question shifts. Not just when did humans need clothing, but how do you even find out when something invisible, something that decomposed thousands of years ago, first appeared? You can't dig up a piece of fur clothing that vanished 170,000 years ago. Cloth rots. Skins decay. There's no ancient closet buried in the ground waiting to be discovered. So how would anyone actually know when clothing began? The answer came from something you'd never expect. Lice. In 2003, biologist Mark Stoneking led a study that examined the genetic divergence between human head lice and human body lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice live in clothing, only surviving because fabric gives them a habitat to cling to. If body lice are a separate species from head lice, then something had to happen for them to evolve differently. That something was clothing. By comparing the DNA of both louse types, Stoneking's team calculated when body lice split off as their own lineage. The estimate placed that divergence at around 170,000 years ago. That means humans were likely wearing some form of clothing, at least occasionally, by that point. Long before agriculture, long before writing, long before anything you'd recognize as civilization. Think about that for a second. Clothing may be older than language as we know it, older than settled communities, older than almost everything you associate with human progress. A later study, led by geneticist David Reed in 2011, examined the same louse divergence using different genetic methods and arrived at a similar window, somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Two separate research teams, two separate approaches, landing in roughly the same era. That's not proof beyond doubt. But in science, when independent methods agree, it's a strong signal you're looking at something real. So picture it. Somewhere in Africa, tens of thousands of years before recorded history, an early human picks up an animal hide. Maybe it was cold, maybe a hunt had just ended, and the skin was simply there, still warm, still useful. Maybe someone noticed that wrapping it around their shoulders stopped the shivering. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just a body responding to discomfort, and a mind smart enough to solve it. But here's where the story gets more interesting than simple survival. Clothing didn't just protect bodies, it changed what humans could become. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan has argued that clothing may have been one of the key technologies that allowed humans to migrate out of Africa and into colder regions of the world. Without insulation, the human body cannot survive prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures. Fur-covered animals could handle the cold. Naked, sweating humans could not without help. Clothing was that help. It was, in a sense, a second skin, a portable climate, something you could put on or take off depending on where your body needed to go next. This matters because it reframes what clothing actually is. You probably think of clothing today as style, identity, fashion, a way to express who you are. But at its origin, clothing was closer to a tool than an outfit. It was closer to fire, closer to a spear, something that extended what the human body could physically do. Without clothing, there is no expansion into Siberia, no survival through Ice Age winters, no migration across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. The naked, hairless body that had been so efficient for endurance hunting under an African sun would have been a death sentence in colder latitudes. Clothing solved that. It let a tropical animal live like it belonged in the Arctic. And there's evidence that clothing technology kept advancing in step with human survival needs. Around 40,000 years ago, archaeologists find the first bone needles, tiny, carefully shaped tools with drilled eyes, clearly designed for sewing. That's not someone draping a hide over their shoulders anymore. That's someone tailoring, fitting fabric to a body, creating layers, creating garments that could be sealed against wind and snow. Needles like these have been found at sites associated with early modern humans in Siberia, in regions where the difference between wearing loose hides and wearing fitted sewn clothing could be the difference between life and death. A gap of wind at the collar, a poorly sealed sleeve. In extreme cold, small failures in clothing design were fatal failures. So somewhere between simply picking up a hide out of discomfort and sewing a fitted parka with a bone needle, clothing evolved from an accident into an engineered survival system. But clothing didn't only protect the body from cold. It changed the way humans related to each other. Once early humans began covering themselves, nakedness stopped being the default state. It became a choice, or the absence of one. Anthropologists have long debated what this shift meant for early human society. Some researchers argue that clothing introduced the very first form of modesty, a social rule layered on top of a biological need. Others argue the opposite, that modesty came much later and that early clothing was purely functional, worn only when the weather demanded it and shed the rest of the time. Either way, once clothing existed, it could be used for more than warmth. A hide could be decorated, a wrap could be dyed, a garment could signal something about the person wearing it, their skill as a hunter, their status within a group, their identity compared to a neighboring tribe. Archaeological finds of shell beads, ochre pigment, and perforated animal teeth, some dating back over 100,000 years, suggest that early humans were already using personal adornment. Once you have a body covering, adornment naturally follows. Function becomes meaning. This is the moment clothing stops being just insulation and starts becoming language, a way of saying something without speaking. You still do this every single day. A job interview outfit says something different than sweatpants on a Sunday morning. A uniform says something different than a costume. None of this vocabulary is new. It's an extension of a system that began with a hide wrapped around cold shoulders for the simple reason that it worked. There's another layer to this story that most people never consider. Clothing may not have only protected humans from the cold. According to Ian Gilligan's research, clothing use may have intensified during Ice Age cooling periods, then relaxed again during warmer interglacial periods, only to return more permanently as the climate cooled further. This back-and-forth pattern suggests clothing wasn't invented once and used forever after. It was adopted, abandoned, and readopted, shaped again and again by the climate humans found themselves living in. That means the invention of clothing wasn't a single spark of genius. It was closer to a repeated negotiation between a fragile, hairless body and an unpredictable planet. Every time the world got colder, humans who could figure out better insulation survived. Every time the world warmed again, that pressure eased, at least for a while. clothing became one of the clearest examples of technology evolving in direct response to environmental pressure, refined generation after generation by trial, failure, and necessity. Consider what this means for the humans who first crossed into Siberia and later into the Americas. These were people equipped with sewn, layered clothing, fitted enough to trap body heat in temperatures that could kill an unprotected person within hours. Without that clothing, none of that migration happens. No crossing the Bering Land Bridge. No populating of 2 entire continents. Something as simple as stitched hide, held together by a bone needle, may be one of the quiet reasons you exist in whatever part of the world your ancestors eventually settled. Why does any of this matter to you now, scrolling on a device in a heated or air-conditioned room, wearing clothes you probably didn't think twice about this morning? Because the instinct is still in you. You still feel cold and reach for another layer without deciding to. You still, without noticing, dress differently for safety, for status, for belonging to a group. That's not modern vanity. That's an old survival behavior wearing a new costume. When you get dressed in the morning, you are repeating an act that stretches back at least 170,000 years. You're not just covering your body, you're participating in one of the oldest continuous technologies your species has ever used, one that let a hairless, sweating primate walk out of the heat of Africa and into every climate on Earth. Consider, too, how strange it is that lice, of all things, became the key to unlocking this history. Nobody set out to study clothing when they studied lice. The discovery came sideways, almost by accident, the way so much of science does. A parasite that could only survive in fabric became a hidden clock, ticking away in the human genome, recording a moment no fossil could ever preserve. There is no photograph of the first human to wear a hide. There is no cave painting of that decision being made. What survived instead was a tiny insect's DNA, carrying a memory the insect itself has no idea it's holding. That's often how the deepest truths about your species get uncovered. Not through dramatic evidence, not through a single perfect fossil, but through indirect clues stitched together from unrelated fields, genetics, archaeology, climate science, all converging on the same rough window of time. Around 170,000 years ago, give or take tens of thousands of years, someone, somewhere, made a choice that changed everything that came after. You will probably get dressed again tomorrow morning without a second thought. The fabric you choose, the layers you add, the way you adjust for the weather outside your window, none of it will feel significant. But every part of that unconscious routine traces back through hundreds of thousands of years of humans doing the exact same thing, solving the exact same problem, using the exact same basic idea. Skin isn't enough. Cover it, and you can go anywhere. You put on clothes this morning without thinking about it. Somewhere in your body, in an instinct older than memory, older than language, that decision was never really new at all.